Imagine waking up and the air in your room is so cold it feels like a physical weight on your chest. You reach for your phone, but there's no electricity. You look out the window, and the landscape isn't just covered in snow. It's buried under a sheet of ice 2 miles thick. For us, a broken heater is an emergency. But for your ancestors 20,000 years ago, this wasn't a bad winter. It was Tuesday. This was the last glacial maximum, the peak of the Ice Age. Most of the northern hemisphere was a frozen desert where a single mistake meant a very cold, very permanent end. So, how did a hairless, tropical primate, built for the African savanna, survive in a world where the ground was permafrost and the wind could freeze your skin in minutes? The answer isn't just they found a cave. The truth is much weirder, much bloodier, and much more clever. When we think of the Ice Age, we think of caves. But there's a problem. Caves don't move, and the food did. To survive, you had to be a nomad. But how do you build a house on a treeless steppe where there's no wood for miles? You use the only thing big enough to stop the wind: mammoths. In places like modern-day Ukraine and Russia, archaeologists have found mammoth bone huts. These weren't just piles of trash. They were architectural marvels. Your ancestors would select up to 95 different mammoths to build a single home. They used the massive jawbones to create a circular foundation, tusks to arch over the top like rafters, and then draped the entire frame in thick skins. Inside, it was surprisingly cozy. But there was a catch. To keep a fire going in a world without trees, you couldn't burn wood. Instead, you burned bone fat. The smell was likely overwhelming, a heavy, greasy smoke that saturated everything you owned. But it kept the temperature above freezing, and in the Ice Age, that was the only metric that mattered. If you walked outside in just a loose fur wrap, you'd be dead within hours. The secret to surviving the Ice Age wasn't just wearing fur. It was the invention of the eyebrow needle. Before the peak of the Ice Age, humans wore draped clothing, essentially capes. But around 30,000 years ago, we see a tech explosion. We started carving tiny, delicate needles out of bird bones and ivory. This allowed us to create tailored clothing. For the first time, humans had sleeves, trousers, and boots that actually fit the contours of their bodies. They invented layering long before outdoor brands made it a marketing term. They wore soft undergarments of fur against the skin, followed by a heavier outer layer, creating a pocket of warm air around the body. They even figured out how to use sinew, the tough tissue from animal legs, as thread. When sinew gets wet, it expands. When it dries, it shrinks and tightens, making the seams of your boots almost entirely waterproof. This was the Gore-Tex of the Pleistocene. What did you eat? You couldn't forage for berries or nuts for half the year. You were an obligate carnivore. In this era, fat was more valuable than gold. If you only ate lean meat, like rabbit, you would actually starve to death through a process called rabbit starvation, where your liver can't process the protein without lipids. You tracked the megafauna, the woolly rhino, the bison, and the mammoth. Hunting wasn't just a sport, it was a high-stakes caloric gamble. A single mammoth could provide enough meat and fat to feed a small tribe for weeks. But to get it, you had to get close, dangerously close, using nothing but stone-tipped spears. This forced another survival mechanism: social banking. If your group had a bad hunt, you starve. Unless, of course, you had a treaty with the tribe 2 valleys over.
Wow,
We find evidence of
what a
seashells and exotic
brilliant
stones
find.
traded over hundreds of
I
miles during this
finally
period.
have one.
Your ancestors survived the cold by staying connected. So, why does this matter to you today? Because you are the product of the survivors. The Ice Age lasted for thousands of years, and it acted as a genetic bottleneck. It weeded out those who couldn't plan ahead, those who couldn't cooperate, and those who weren't creative. When you feel that urge to stay inside and get cozy during a winter storm, or when you feel a sense of relief sitting around a campfire, that is a 20,000-year-old echo. It's the memory of the bone hut. We didn't just survive the Ice Age, we were forged by it. The technology, the social bonds, and the sheer grit it took to live through the Great Cold are exactly what made us the dominant species on Earth today. We are the children of the frost. And the next time you
It's so
complain about the
cold.
AC being too high, Just remember, at least you didn't have to build your house